Hi, I'm the History Guy. I have a degree in history, and I love history. And if you love history too, well, this is the channel for you. Celebrities pass away all the time. I mean, the sad fact is that no one lives forever, and as shocking as it is sometimes, even the famous give way to age. And it happens so often that it's easy to miss when someone passes like that. And so in 2004, when the oldest living resident of Great Britain passed, it made some newspapers here and there, but it was largely missed by the wider world. And that's tragic to me because she lived such an extraordinary life and was truly extraordinary, one of a kind. She was the gentlest soul that you would ever meet, but that belied a life that had gracefully withstood enormous turmoil and change. No hapless victim, she served her country in true brutal wars and then came home to be famous, hobnobbing with royalty and movie stars and music stars. She is someone who certainly deserves to be remembered. And if I didn't mention, her name was Timothy, and she was a tortoise. A Mediterranean spur-thighed tortoise, to be exact, thought to be the oldest living example of her species. She was likely born in Turkey around 1844, and her story begins, as all great stories do, with being kidnapped by pirates. Timothy's early days are a bit of a mystery. She didn't really like to talk about her past, but one of the stories is that she was originally found aboard a Portuguese privateer, essentially a state-sponsored pirate, in 1854. Privateers are essentially given a license by their government to engage in piracy against an enemy. And if Timothy really did serve on a Portuguese privateer, that would have been against the French, who had frequent conflicts with the Portuguese. And if she really was a pirate in 1854, she was among the last, because in the Declaration of Paris in 1856, all the major European powers got together and abolished the practice of licensing pirates. The end of the age of piracy was one of the many changes that Timothy would endure in her life. While the rumors of service aboard a Portuguese pirate ship seem somewhat fanciful, we do know that Timothy was acquired by John Guy Courtney Everard of the Royal Navy in 1854, and that her size at the time suggested that she was about 10 years old. Everard assumed that she was a male, and so gave her the name Timothy, and she served as the mascot aboard the warship HMS Queen during the first bombardment of Sevastopol during the Crimean War in 1854. The war in the Crimea was a complex affair, fought between the Empire of Russia and an alliance of the empires of England, France, the Ottoman Empire, and the Kingdom of Sardinia, and it had to do with growing Russian influence in the Middle East. In the end, Russia lost and was forced to give up territories that it had claimed from the Ottoman Empire, and the war changed power structures in Europe, but not before it cost nearly 1 million lives, many of those to diseases like cholera. Timothy and HMS Queen served during the bombardment of the fortress of Sevastopol in the Crimea. It was a bloody affair. The Allied fleet was unable to do much damage to the fortifications, but took quite a lot of damage from the shore batteries. HMS Queen herself was set afire 3 times during the battle. A harrowing affair, even for a seasoned pirate. It was during the Crimean War that Timothy's owner met perhaps the most famous veteran of the Crimean War, the nurse Florence Nightingale, who developed the practice of modern nursing in the hospitals in that horrible war. Coincidentally, Florence Nightingale also had a pet tortoise. Its name was Jimmy. Timothy followed Courtney Everard in his naval career, serving next as the mascot aboard the HMS Princess Charlotte, a 104-gun ship of the line, during the Second Opium War. The Second Opium War was another complex affair fought between 1854 and 1860 that was between the British and French empires and the Chinese Qing dynasty, and it had to do with opening trade in China. It was a war of questionable justification that supported the destructive opium trade. In the Second Opium War, the Royal Navy participated in the attacks on the Taku forts, which was a series of fortifications on the High River. And again, the Navy took terrible casualties trying to fight the shore bombardment. But since it was on a river, they were forced to use smaller gunboats that could go up the river, so Timothy was probably spared the worst of the fighting out on the Princess Charlotte. In the end, Britain prevailed, and China was forced to make concessions in what China referred to as the unequal treaty. Having served in two of the most significant conflicts of the era, Timothy continued to follow Courtney Everhard's naval career. And when he retired in 1880, he passed her to another naval officer. She didn't leave the Navy clear until 1892, after 38 years' service in the Royal Navy. From then on, she lived in England, eventually with Courtney Everhard's family, the Earls of Devon, who lived in an estate near Exeter called Powderham. It was there in 1926 when the 14th Earl of Devon took Timothy to the London Zoological Society to see if he could mate. And they found out for the very first time that Timothy was, in fact, a she, thus revealing her to be part of a distinguished group of women, the first known example of which was Epipole of Carystus during the Trojan War, of women who masqueraded as men so that they could serve in time of war. It was there at Powderham Estate, quietly munching her favorite meal of strawberries in the garden and hibernating each year under a wisteria tree, that Timothy withstood great changes in culture, lived through 2 world wars, the Blitz, which nearly destroyed the city of Exeter. From the 1960s on, Powderham had tours, and so Timothy was given a tag that said, "Hello, my name is Timothy. I'm very old. Please do not pick me up." When the movie The Remains of the Day was filmed at Powderham in 1993, she met actor Christopher Reeve. And as Powderham started holding concerts, she met famous rock stars, including Roger Daltrey of The Who. When Timothy passed away in 2004, she was thought to have been the oldest living resident of the United Kingdom, the longest-lived example of a spur-thighed tortoise, and the last surviving veteran of both the Crimean and Opium Wars. And while it might seem somewhat fanciful to see history through the eyes of a tortoise, she is perhaps the greatest living example of the permanence of nature and the transience of humanity. Author Rory Knight Bruce, in his endearing work on Timothy the tortoise, has suggested a movement to have the word Timothesis, meaning the wisdom that is derived from age, added to the Oxford Dictionary of the English language. I'm behind that 100%. When Timothy was born, Victoria was Queen of England and John Tyler was President of the United States. 34 presidents and 6 monarchs later, she passed away, reminding us all that no matter how long you live, life is short, and you should always take the time to enjoy the strawberries. I'm the History Guy. I hope you enjoyed this edition of my series, 5 Minutes of History, short snippets of forgotten history, 5 to 10 minutes long. If you did enjoy them, please click the thumbs up button that'll be there on the left. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to write them in the comment section and I will be happy to respond. And if you'd like 5 minutes more of forgotten history, all you need to do is click that subscribe button that's there on your right.